Welcome to District 32, immersion, inspiration for ambitious business owners with big dreams.
Hello and welcome to a very special panel discussion today with three business experts on, what is franchising right for your business? What are all the things that you need to know about franchising? What are the nuts and bolts? What is the good, the bad, and the ugly? So who is on our panel today? First of all, we've got Andrew Ford. He is the CEO of Ford & Doonan. It's a multi-award winning, multi-million-dollar national franchise. Hi, Andrew. You want to give people a wave? You've got loads and loads of input. We've also got Azim Sahu-Khan. He's from Business Performance Tuning, and he's been working with franchise owners all over the world to help them to run a better business. So thank you very much, Azim. Give us a wave. And we've also got Clayton Trelaor. So Clayton is a partner and CEO of MBE Australia with over 40 franchises in Australia. So the expertise in the room, if we say, is second to none. Thank you very much for joining us today. It is a hot topic among business owners. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask specific questions. I'll probably gear them to specific individuals, but if you've got something to say, we can have a bit of a group discussion a bit later on. So first of all, one of the questions that often get asked, or I've spoken to yourself about, Azim, is why do you want to franchise your business in the first place? Right?
Yeah, look, Lorraine, that's but before I start, you did say the good, the bad, and the ugly, and there is three of us, so I think we need to probably figure out who's who before we.
I'm the good.
Okay. I guess that makes you bad, Andrew, and I'll just go over.
I'll wear that.
Right. So I think one of the big questions is, realistically, when someone's looking at franchising their business, there's kind of only two reasons. One of the reasons is that they need access to more capital and more cash flow so that they can expand their overall business. And that's probably the key reason that people do it. But when you really look at it, is if you don't have a good reason to have feet on the ground and building that brand presence and recruiting and building the community with your end customers, you often should just think, well, is there a way I can expand by just using company stores rather than going down the whole route of franchising? So the first question is, and I get people asking me all the time, hey, look, I'm looking at franchising my business. And the first question is, well, why? Why do you want to do that? And it's that really where you've got to start, is figure out why it is that's driving you to become a franchise. Now, sure, if you're building a business for an exit and, you want to sell the whole franchise and you know who you're going to sell it to, like, I'm going to attach it to some other franchise or some brands or whatever, that's a different story. But in general, if you're just a person with one or two stores or outlets or service provider, whatever, you've got to have a really good answer as to why you want to go ahead and do it. Because I've seen a lot of money spent on people getting ready and then just not going ahead with it.
So I think that is a really key question to be answered. Andrew, Clayton, do you have any other comments on that? Is it the right model for you in the first place? Do you have any other comments on that, Andrew?
Yeah. I was just going to say one thing is it has to be tried and tested. There's no point in franchising your model if you're struggling in certain areas. So it's got to be very much true, tried and tested. It's one thing I've learned.
I'd add to that, is your business profitable enough to be franchisable? Is there enough gross margin to be shared potentially between the franchisee and the franchisor, still having a workable and viable share of that revenue?
Yeah, it's not just a way to make more sales.
No.
It really needs to be looked at. And just for the sake of the recording here, we are inviting other people to join us on here so we can do a bit of a Q&A. So when you see other people's names pop up, I'm just asking them to stay on mute for now, but we can open up in panel discussions as we go on. So look, so first questions there, is franchising the right model? Second one, is there enough money in the business? And are you working as a business? Are you profitable? Do you have systems, processes, and profitability that other people can leverage off? Because that's what you're selling in the first place. Now, what I would also, a really great question or comment that I've heard you talk about, Azim, before is, well, what kind of person do you need to be a franchisor? Can anybody be a franchisor?
Look, you've got to look at it and the question I ask is this the right person to be a franchisor? Which comes back to what you just said, which relates to the first question: is why am I doing this? Right. So I've examined well over 50 franchises now, franchise systems around the world, and there's different motivations for when people have got into it, and sometimes the motivation changes. Like some franchisors, for want of a better term, actually almost resent their franchisees, right? Particularly when they're successful, think, oh, geez, they're making more money than me. And then you get other ones who it's just like family. If a franchisor is having trouble or difficulties, they're in their boots and all. And Clayton, you actually related a story last night about how you jumped in and actually helped one of your franchisees. So I guess that makes Clayton in the good section, right? How you jumped in and helped one of your franchisees actually do the work when they were stuck with a big order to go out. So, so you get these two extremes. So can anyone be a franchisee? Look, the first question is, if you're going to get into franchising, well, you would probably already have a team, like working in your business as it is. And a great indicator is how well you treat that team. Because in the early days, your franchisees are generally an extension of your team. And if I come across someone who's treating their team not so well, you sort of think, it's not going to get any better just by franchising. You can't kick the can down the road. So I will normally look at how well does this person treat their team, or what is their attitude towards sharing in the success, supporting people along the way. And like, if you're a micromanager of your business, you're right down the other end of the spectrum, whether you should franchise or not. You've got a lot of work to do before you can. You got to, what's the song? Let it go.
So, Andrew, you're nodding your head there around that. What's the difference between being a business owner and a franchise owner? What are the core differences?
I think you've got to become a bit of a politician, as in that working people's different personality types and not be pig-headed. So I think, as Azim indicated, if you're not already a people person, I think you're going to be struggling to be a franchisor. If you are, like you said, a micromanager or a control freak. We found that we're very much politicians, putting out fires and placating people's little queries or concerns. So I think people skills are a very high criteria.
And what do you think, Clayton? What's the difference there?
Yeah, also understanding that there's so many different people and different personalities and different cultures. And if you're trying to manage the franchise with a bit of an iron fist and say, right, this is trying to fit a round peg in a square hole, it's not going to work. You have to realize there's so many different people out there, different personalities, and you have to adjust your way of managing the business to all those different needs. That's one thing I've learned over the years.
What's the difference?
And I think one of the things there that Clayton just touched on too, Lorraine, is where I've seen a lot of franchisors have a lot of difficulties is if they didn't, all the things that Clayton just alluded to, if they don't have a good franchisee selection process to start with. If it's a warm body and a check and they take them on board, it's just a hiding to nothing later. But if they have a good selection process and they can really interview that person or the people that want to come on as a franchisees, that makes life a whole lot easier. I mean, we can't interview our kids before they're born, but with a franchise system, you can interview the franchisee before you make them part of the family, So I think franchisee selection is what trips up a lotot of people.
I'm going to remember that, Azim, a warm body and a check. Pulse optional.
I've seen it.
On the back of that, though, I mean, what is the core difference between managing a team of employees and managing a team of franchisors or franchisees? Is it the same?
I'll comment on that one. I don't think, it's similar, obviously, many traits are the parts of it, but I think it's also very different because they're non-employees and they're not going to listen to you the same way that an employee would and follow instructions. So you've got to work with them, like Clayton indicated, to sort of get the best out of them and get what you want them to do, but using kit gloves and a lot more.
Okay.
Plus also, if you're wanting to franchise your business, you're not looking for a bunch of employees. You're looking for business owners. You're looking for like-minded people that are willing to run their own business and learn how to run their own business. And and we can mentor them and coach them, but at the end of the day, they're running their own business. They're accountable for their own P&L. Whereas employees, if you're running a corporate entity, they're still accountable for their store or their business, but they're not a director of that company. And there's a huge difference in that. And I think that's why franchising is so important, to get the right people on board that have like-minded reasons for doing it.
Yeah.
And the
I just
culture.
noticed a question came in from Rob on the chat there, which we'll send to Andrew and Clayton, which is, what are the top 3 things you look for when selecting a new franchisee? Sorry, Lorraine, did you want to keep those to the end, or do you just want to take them as they come?
No, I was just going to go do them as we go along. I've got it open though, Azim.
Okay,
so on you go, Rob. Rob has asked that question. What do you guys think? The top 3 things looking for when selecting a new franchisee?
Adaptability. You don't want somebody that's going to come along that's run their own. I like people that have had some business experience. It's not essential, but it can really help. But you need to be adaptable. You don't bring your business ideas into someone else's franchise and start running it the way you want to run it. There's a reason McDonald's is successful, because they've got their recipe for success in terms of their food. You don't go and start selling chicken wings, So I think it's important that my top, and the others can add to this to round off the 3, but my top would be, this is the recipe for success. This is the reason my business has been around for 27 years. So come on in, learn how to adapt to the way we do things, and you'll be successful as well. If you're coming in with a different head, thinking, I'm going to go in and buy, say, an MBE store, and I'm going to run it the same way I've run my own print business or something, then it probably won't work. There's a reason why you're buying a franchise. Why would you spend all that money and buy a franchise in the first place? That'd be my top.
Okay.
I'd say, do they fit the existing company culture? Like, if you've got company stores, could they slot in as an employee and believe the same things that you believe in and not be radically different?
Okay, so
that's a good one.
I think that there's a lot to consider there, even before we think about franchising. Are we the right kind of person? Can we be adaptable? And great points of view between the franchisee and the franchisor about who you're taking on, culture, working with people. So let's move on then and talk a little bit about the money. Let's talk about selling a franchise. And I know you touched on before around, is there enough profitability in there? Well, let's answer that first one before we talk about a buy-in price or a sale price for a franchise. How much is good profitability? Do you have to be at a far greater level of profitability to start franchising than a regular business or a non-franchisable business? Is there a rule of thumb around the profitability?
I'm not aware of any rule of thumb, but I think if we all set our market prices differently, and some businesses are sort of premium, some compete on price. I think if you're at that competing on price already in the market, it's fair to say there's probably less of that margin to go around to two entities. So I think you've almost got to be at sort of middle to a premium price point and profitability to follow in your existing business in order for there to be enough to go around.
Okay, that's a great point. Azim, were you going to say something there?
Yeah, I think, to support what Andrew has just said, there's a lot to be said when you, as a client or a customer of a franchise, if it's a good brand, one would hope that, if someone launching a franchise is that's their goal, to have a good brand. There's a lot of brand equity in that. So that, we'll use the Mac as example, McDonald's as opposed to the Greasy Joe's, right? You've got more confidence. You may not like the food, but you've got more confidence going to McDonald's than you have going to Greasy Joe's, right? So the thing there is, you can, in some franchise systems, demand a premium price in a marketplace that has similar things, but your brand allows you to do that. I was going to say get away with it, but to do that successfully, to demand a premium price. In fact, if you want to look at it at a different level, just look at the motor vehicle industry. I mean, why do people pay so much more for some of the brands when it's just 4 wheels of motor? And I can't believe I just said that, but just 4 wheels of motor and just a car, right?
Yeah.
Hey, so again, some great points on there. So you're looking for a reasonable or a premium level of profitability because you need enough to share and go around. How do we price a franchise? You know, if we're looking it up and imagine, so we're Azim's in Sydney, but the rest of us are in Western Australia at the minute. I mean, how do you go about mapping territories and then pricing them? Where do you start there? Andrew, let me ask you that one.
Yeah, two distinct questions there, but I'll touch on the territory one because that's something we learnt the hard way. Is when we first started franchising back in 2001, 2002, we had no idea of how big it was going to finish up being, and we were just way too generous with the size of the territories that we were selling. And we live to regret that because we finished up buying back a couple of parcels of part of the territories because we were just too generous. So think ahead to almost the best case scenario of how many, and even if the first few franchisees have access to multiple territories, although they legally only have one, you can easily take them back as you start to grow. But once you've given them the big tract of territory, it's going to cost you to get it back.
Yeah, okay. So be careful around the generosity. And I think we would do that in the beginning, you know, because we're just trying to get it sold and trying to get the model up and running.
And that can be, Andrew's still obviously wearing the scars of that. That can be a really big problem for the profitability of the entire franchise system. Because if an early franchisee, and I've seen this on a couple of occasions now, if an early franchisee has a much bigger territory than they can actually service properly at the level that you want them to service, the net result is the end customer, who's the bread and butter, why we're doing this whole thing, is not getting serviced properly. So you're actually hobbling the whole business by giving too much away to start with.
Yeah.
Wow.
And value. So I was just going to add on to the upfront cost, Lorraine, first part of the question. Again, what is taking us a long time to realize, although it's pretty obvious when you stop and think about it, we've now realized that the price you charge up front is so much less important than the lifetime value of that franchisee. So whether you're charging $100,000 or $500,000 up front, if you've got them for the next 20 years, and some of ours are coming up to 20 years, and they've paid you X amount per annum since then, the initial fee almost pales into insignificance. And don't be greedy at the start, because if they're the right franchisee, you're going to get 20, 30 plus years of royalties from them.
Right, another great point there. So again, there's no rule of thumb, is there, for a price? So it's not like this is how much revenue you're going to expect, and then we're going to charge you 5% of that up front. There's no rule of thumb.
Really, you just look at your industry, look at what your competition's charging because there's obviously in the franchise industry there's two fees. There's the initial franchise fee, and then there's the ongoing royalty fee. So what Andy was saying is don't price it too high to begin with, because the sake of $20 or $50 or $60,000 in the original franchise fee, over the term of the 10-year franchise agreement, it could be in the hundreds of thousands or even millions. So just price yourself competitively. When we sort of rejigged our model a few years back, we just looked at what our competition was charging for an initial franchise fee, and then the rest of the price is made up of the actual fixtures and fittings and opening the business itself. And just touching back on that territory part of that question on the territory thing too, there are some professional territory mapping companies out there that can map territories based on your client base, units of demand, the ANZIC codes. We use a very great company based out of Sydney that has actually mapped our territories based on stats and numbers. So you can define it that way.
Right. Okay.
Lorraine, if I may, one more thing that I'd love to share with territories is our model is we divide up leads by postcodes. But what we failed to think about, again, back 18, 19 years ago, was our territories didn't follow postcode boundaries. It might have followed the freeway or major roads. So what happened pretty well soon straight away was when we tried to divide leads by territory, by postcode, we had them staggering across territories, which created more problems. So again, if you think you're going to divide marketing inbound leads by postcode, which is quite most logical way to, and easiest way we've found, is make sure your territory boundaries align with the postcode boundaries.
Yeah, the mistakes we make in the beginning? That it's the simple stuff you miss.
That's right. Yeah.
So look, what else? If I was a franchisee looking to buy a business, what else, or a franchisor? Sorry, let's look as a franchisor. What else can I do to make my business look attractive to a buyer? What else are they looking for? We've already touched on profitability. What else can you do to make it look attractive to a potential buyer?
As the non-franchisor on this thing, but probably have had more to do with a lot of different franchisors. I think one of the things that I've seen new franchisees express to me is that one of the things that attracted them was actually the culture of the organization. Right? If a franchise is detectable, because they'll and you can tell straight away if you ring up about a potential franchise, and I do that a reasonable amount of time to see what their processes are in terms of what sort of treatment you get. You can quickly tell if a franchisor or the person representing the franchise says, "Hey, let me give you all the numbers and names of a whole bunch of franchises. Why don't you give them a call and see what their experience is?" If that's the first or one of the first things they say, you know that they're confident in the culture and what they're delivering. If they say, "Oh, we need you to sign an NDA before you speak to any franchisee," and I can tell you now with the franchise systems that I've worked with over the last 6 years, I actually do a secret shop before I even start working with them. And, and I've had one particular one where I rang and there was almost a palatable fear to tell me anything more about, I wasn't asking detailed numbers. I just said, "Well, what's it like?" And it's like, "Oh, have you spoken to the franchisor yet?" And I thought, "Oh, that's a warning bell. If I was buying one, I wouldn't be. That would have been the end of the conversation." By the way, we fixed that.
Yeah.
Very good. Lorraine, I was going to add, Lorraine, also, I think what's so critical for a franchisee is the support they're going to get, again, pretty logical from the franchisor, especially in their sort of foundation months, years, when they're going to need more support. Are they just set and forget, or is the franchisor willing to get in there and help train them and retrain them if they need it, spend time in the company stores as part of that training, and just that overall support package?
Thank you. So that's something really important that we need to touch on. I know I've spoken to you about that before, Clayton. What are the benefits of being in a franchise group where we can, tap into some of that, the marketing support?
Yeah, I mean, obviously being a bit part of a bigger group, you've got marketing buying power. So, if you can do, e.g., we sponsor District 32, but for me to sponsor District 32 as a independent owner, it might not be affordable, but as a group and we pull it all together, we can do things like that. Also, your relationship with suppliers. You're obviously, being part of a group, you usually, the group has a preferred supplier agreement and you're able to tap in on those prices. As an independent, you can't. Branding, brand awareness, it just covers everything. And honestly, one of the top reasons why I joined our franchise is exactly what Azim was just saying. It's all about the culture. Before I made a decision to actually join MBE, I was invited to one of their national franchise conferences. And after having, some great conversations with the people there and seeing what they're like and the fact that they're just like very big family orientated company, that was what made my decision too. Whereas, there are loads of franchises out there, and I'm sure some of them I have heard along the traps that some of them, a lot of the franchisees are very competitive with each other, and that's not what you want. You want more collaboration and more networking. It's all about being a part of a network. We call our MBE franchise network a network for obvious reasons. So they were my top reasons.
So they support each other. Do they support each other and just problem solving in general?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they help each other. If someone's machine's down, they can just pop in and use their machine. Or, I'm sure in Andy's business, if everyone calls in sick in one group, one franchise group, I'm sure there's other people around that'll just, patch in and help out, get this urgent job done that was, due yesterday type of thing. And that's what a franchising is all about. You just help each other out. Nobody expects anything in return. It just automatically comes as being part of a group.
I never thought about that. I think sickies. Something you don't think about though. Sorry, Azim.
That's okay. But going on what Clayton just said, I mean, it is vitally important, because if you rewind, I said at the start as to why someone would franchise their business. Well, why does a franchisee come on board? As you know, they may be coming out of a job, they may be coming out of a different business. It's really because they don't want to do the heavy lifting of creating their whole business and creating all this brand equity and creating all this support system and creating the culture from scratch. So that's really the only reason someone will, like, if you peel away the onion, that's why someone's getting into it, because an existing brand, all that sort of thing. So a great indicator, and I use this as an indicator when I'm evaluating franchise systems, I sort of look at what are the subcommittees, if you like, depending on the franchise, product. Is there, a technical committee and all this sort of thing? And then you can quickly figure out the health, if you want, for better, of the system by the amount of intake there is into those committees. If people are always like say, oh, can I get on the committee, whatever, that people want to contribute and illustrate what Clayton's talking about. But if it's been the same person on the technical committee for the last 15 years, then it's kind of, there's no, it's not going through from that point. And a case in point, when, as you know, I was sort of stuck in New Zealand for a month when I went over to speak at one of the conferences. But at the conference I spoke at, even though I work directly with a small bunch of the franchisees within that, there's about 35 franchisees in that whole system. And during the course of the evening at the awards dinner, I had probably 23 different franchisees come up to me, and I have spoken there previously, and say, if you're stuck for a place while you're here, you're more than welcome to come and stay with us. Now, as someone who's just come from a COVID-ridden state, right? Okay, that was a huge generosity for people to reach out of someone they've only really met a couple of times, over the last 24 months. But that's a great indicator of the culture of the people that are in that system. If more than 3/4 of them offered me to come and stay with them if I was stuck, I was just humbled by that,
Mm.
So people, need to be aware that, having your own business then, or having your own franchise, you are joining a network, you are joining a team, you are joining support, you are joining, pooled resources. It doesn't have to be a solitary or a solo journey as a franchisee. What were you going to say there, Andrew?
I was just going to touch on Clayton's point about marketing and buying power. That's one of the biggest things that we found is a benefit for us, as we've still got 2 company stores as well as 10 franchisees, is we go shopping now as a collaborative group to suppliers to negotiate better deals, because suddenly there's 12 stores buying and we're a major player there, as opposed to 12 individuals who aren't going to be big enough to get any special discounts or any special rebates. And the same thing with the marketing. If we had our marketing budget divided by 12, all doing our own thing, effectively competing against each other for Google, Words, all that sort of thing, we're just not going to get the same power that we get combining and then going to Channel 7 and all the radio stations, and we just buy so much more and get so much bang for your buck.
So great buying power then as well when you're dealing with suppliers. So let's talk about that. That's when it's working out. What about when it all goes pear-shaped? How do we know when we might have the wrong person on the bus, or what are the rules there? How do we deal with disputes? How do we deal with somebody that's not quite fitting the culture that we're talking about? I'll ask Andrew. I'll ask you first.
Yeah, look, we've had our share of challenges, but fortuitously, touching on many points we've said before, is every one of our franchisees I consider a friend that I enjoy spending social times with. So maybe we're just super lucky, but we've got such a great bunch of people in our group. But that's not saying we haven't had trouble too. And it's got to a stage one where we had to bring in a franchise mediator between 2 franchisees that were in sort of dispute. And then that finished up us creating an ethics and dispute resolution policy and a handbook. So if in the future this happens, we can convene a committee of one representative for the franchisor, 2 franchisee representatives to listen to the case and make an arbitrary decision. So that's how bad it got to at one point, but we've never had to exercise that, luckily.
That's interesting. I thought that when I said how do we handle disputes, I meant between you and the franchisee, not the franchisees against each other. So,
yeah, exactly.
Turf war, having a dance off. Yeah.
Turf war.
What were you going to say, Azim?
I was just saying turf wars is the most common thing that I've seen with, let's call it friction between franchisees. Okay. Or, someone not pulling their weight when they're doing a promotion, or somebody benefiting from the local marketing. Oh, well, the so-and-so gets to see that billboard as well, and he's not really contributing, and it's just like, it's quite, it could be quite hair-raising at times, I'm sure.
So does that come back to, some sort of, these are the terms when you join us, this is how we communicate with each other, what are the rules of engagement, or, the rules of communicating with other. I'm imagining now, as speaking with you, that's some hefty administration around procedures and dispute handling. I'm supposing the franchise agreement is a big thing, isn't it? The document itself. Clayton.
Yeah, it is. It's in the franchise agreement, but I also am a big believer in having not only a vision or a mission statement, but also company values. And, if there's any company out there, and it doesn't matter how big you are, whether you've got 1 location or 1 million locations, if it doesn't have a company value or values, I'm big on that. So whenever I speak to incoming franchisees or potential leads or current franchisees, I always just remind them this is our vision, and these are our values. And if you can stick by these values, then we generally, can all walk the same path. I know I understand there's always, issues, but the best to just talk it out and get it through. But at the end of the day, they're buying a franchise. They've signed a franchise agreement. They've got copies of absolutely everything you could possibly want to run the franchise. And if they sort of veer off that path, you just get them back on the path again. And if they're off the path and they don't want to be on the path, then we usually just help them with an exit strategy. That's really all there is to it. Some people, are just not cut out for it, and you just help them exit the system, because there's no point in bringing everyone else down with you, right?
Yeah, we call it freeing them up for new opportunities, Clayton. So
you'd be happier somewhere else.
But it's interesting, because what Clayton just touched on is absolutely key. Because when I look at franchise agreements, and when I'm talking to the franchisor, I'll often see something that's maybe special in their agreement. And I'll say, what happened to cause you to put this into the agreement? And it goes to your point, Andrew, about having to convey that whole system to deal with that in the future. A lot of what happens in franchise agreements is the result of something that happened in the past that they're protecting themselves from in the future. But to Clayton's point, and as you know, Lorraine, from the work that we've done together, I'm huge on creating a set of guiding principles. So within that, you've got your vision, you've got your mission, and you've got your values that Clayton was speaking to. But we also put in immutable laws, and they basically might be 5 to 8 things that are basically, that's the commandments. We'll have things like the rules are the rules, and that will be an immutable law. And then we work with that. I've got one franchisor who actually has, I know it's a family show, but we actually have no a-holes as one of their immutable laws, right? And the interesting thing is that when I did
is this a family show?
So the interesting thing was, with one of the franchisors, when I was helping them craft their guiding principles, and it's at the franchisor level too, right? That's really important, because we get all the staff in, because I've been in meetings in corporate life where we'd spend a week debating on whether it should be and or in a mission statement. That's just total rubbish, because at the end of the day, staff, franchisees can move on. But it's a franchisor system, and they're the ones that have got to live or die with that system. So really, I work to bring out that essence with them. And, one of the things there is that if you've got those immutable laws that shouldn't be broken, then it suddenly brings a whole light. And one franchisor I was working with, when we did his immutable laws, he said, you know what? I realized that every argument or trouble that I've had with the supplier not a franchisee, but with the supplier, is we have a total difference in values. And it just acts, so, you know, what Clayton's got there and what he's talking about, and I'm sure Andrew's got the same, is just so important, because it's even the same in life. If we don't share values with people, you know, we can tolerate them, but we don't necessarily get on. So that goes with suppliers, customers, and the franchisees themselves, you know, and
missing
that's
the love.
Well, it's also important for those franchisees to follow the values for their fellow franchisees too. You know, if they're not following the company's value and company's vision, then they're not being fair on their fellow franchisees, and that's the reason why we have to lead by example and make sure they're following those. Because at the end of the day, you know, there's other franchisees involved in this business too, and if someone's trying to, you know, not deliberately but giving the company a bad name, it's going to affect the other franchisees, and they don't like that.
We've got an official no dickhead policy.
Oh.
There you go.
It's actually in our manual. It's good.
There you go. So you've got an immutable law, no dickheads, right? It's the same. Right?
Well, we call ours misfits, right? We try to keep it a bit. So, look, well, we've covered a fair bit of ground there. We've spoken about the territories, we've spoken about pricing, we've spoken about, are you the right person? Have you got the right business? Is the profitability there? Can you work with people? Can you be adaptable? We've looked at some of the drawbacks, the procedures, the manuals that we need, the disputes that need to be handled, the mass benefits around bulk buying and supplier agreements. But Clayton, you're also on the Franchise Council of Australia. Where would you reckon, where does somebody start? So, I mean, there's some really great questions on here and gaining points, but if I've watched this presentation, I'm thinking, right, okay, I think I'm at that stage. I would like to start looking at that. Where do we go? What do we do?
From a franchisor perspective, looking at franchising the business. Yeah, look, the Franchise Council of Australia has a lot of information. They represent the franchising industry in Australia, but I would actually probably start with talking with someone that sort of specializes in from a legal perspective. Talk to a lawyer that specializes in franchising, because they can then supply you with, you know, the code of conduct, you know, the how to get into a franchise. You know, there is a very, very strict franchising code of conduct that we all have to stick by, and putting together disclosure documents. There is a whole process, but where to start? I'd probably talk to somebody that specializes in franchising, because otherwise you're going to get too many different opinions from different people. I wouldn't go onto Google. Google is full of you know, yes and no answers. So the Franchise Council of Australia or a franchising lawyer would be my top two.
Well, thanks for that. Andrew and Azim, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that like the legal part is really a minefield, right, for everybody. And to Clayton's point, you know, like someone who's just deciding that they want to franchise their business, you know, may not even be aware that we have a unfair contracts, you know, act essentially, so that you can't make it all one-sided. Because, you know, again, back to, are you the right person to be a franchisor? If you're sort of saying, oh, you know, they're going to do what I say and I'm going to have complete control, it's just not going to wash, right? Because the ACCC won't let you have an agreement that looks like that, right? And so starting where Clayton said, I mean, you know, the Franchise Council will certainly point you in the right direction, but then to get that legal advice initially is great. And just to circle back to your point about profitability, I mean, a test that I will often say to somebody, said, look, and unfortunately, I used to say it before COVID hit, was if something caused you not to be able to sell anything at all, are you able to put enough money away as a matter of normal course of operations that the business could run for 3 months without you having to lay anybody off or anything like that? So that's usually a test for me of what profitability is, if they can keep putting that little bit away so that they could run 3 months and not have to put anybody off. That's, for me, that's usually a reasonable measure. And if it's not that way, we sort of work on how can you get it to that, because that's, and COVID unfortunately proved me right. And you know, that's just to circle back to the profitability part.
But it's also having a little bit of common sense on the back of profitability, Azim.
But,
we need to be very profitable and spend like maniacs.
Someone, when we were going for our liquor license, when we had cafes many years ago, he gave me a gem, and it was, whose common sense are we talking about? Yours or mine? Right.
Very true.
That's right. Andrew?
I was just going to say, there's also franchise consultants who obviously specialize in preparing businesses for franchising. They could well be a worthy first port of call too, to get some advice, and just maybe a simple, your business isn't ready to be franchised type advice, and open their eyes to some basics of franchising, as well as the other recommendations, Clayton, and that.
I think you're right. I mean, we have to get someone to look at your financial modelling and does it make sense? And, there's a minefield of information. I know, Azim, you help businesses as a franchise consultant. You do that as well. So he's there. And look, there's loads of people in the network that we know who can all give expert advice on the franchising in specific. But is there just to finish off then, is there anything else that you'd just like to add? Any tips, tricks, things we should look out for?
Yeah, I'd like to add something, Lorraine, if I can. I'll just pull it up on my screen so I can read it okay. Is often people, when they're looking at franchising, sort of think it's, I won't say the silver bullet, right? But it's bulletproof, right? And I quickly bring, and I've just got some figures here, and this is only in the US, and it's like 2017 to 2019, but it gives you a really good indication of the Subway franchises in the US. In that period that I just described, they had 4,148 franchisees fail. The businesses failed, right? Of a total of 23,000 franchises. If you look at Pizza Hut, you're looking at 626 in the same period. Century 21, you're looking at 391. McDonald's, there was 431 franchise failures out of 13,000 locations during that 2-year period. So for someone looking to create a franchise system, do not go in the total misconception that this is a way to make your business rock solid. If anything, you make yourself even more exposed, because now you're serving all of these other franchisees who are technically your first level of customers. So I've met a few people say, it'd be great, because they only see the successes. But even with the successes, I just named some very household names there, and you've got units failing within that.
So yeah, you do your homework, and there were some substantial numbers there. Clayton, Andrew, do you have anything else that you want to add? And some of our guests who are on, feel free to post a question if you have one.
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to go the next level. I've spoken to a lot of people just by networking, asking, how do I get into franchising and what's involved. It looks overwhelming when you look at it from the surface, but there are 1,200 different franchise units in Australia with over 65,000 franchise locations. It's very, very popular. It employs over 500,000 people in the industry. So we're just talking franchise units. So it can be done. It doesn't matter if you're a small operator running a little bookkeeping business up to a big food outlet. But don't be afraid. But just be sure of yourself and believe in what type of business you are running, and if you love what you do and you're doing well at it, you'd be surprised. It probably is ready to be franchised.
Okay, thanks.
I'll finish on a positive too. Our business wouldn't be what it is today if we'd rolled out company stores in lieu of franchises. Our business is what might seem pretty simple, putting air conditioning in. It's actually very complicated. There's many processes, many things can go wrong, and the care level that's required. I just would not want to be the MD of a 12-store company store setup. It would be a nightmare. With the franchisees, it's brilliant. They win, we win, everyone wins. So it's the best thing we've done. And all our franchisees, you could read any one of them and they say the same thing.
Thanks.
That's because you have no dickheads, Andrew. That's why.
Look, I've got one last question on here from Rob, and he said, is there a balance between pricing it too low? Because we know we talked about the price low, don't get greedy at the start. But he said, is there a balance between pricing it too low and attracting tire kickers versus overpricing and scaring them away, or the people that you actually want scaring them away?
I think it comes down to franchisee selection again.
Yeah,
You know,
I
if
don't
you've got a
think
good
so.
selection process, you weed the tire kicker out at that level anyway. The money's not the issue at that point.
Yeah, okay.
The only thing I'd
There's
say
some
on
people, doesn't
money
matter
is
how much money they're going to give you, you're not going to give them a franchise.
Yeah.
I was just going to add, we make sure we get personal balance sheets to make sure their financial ability to be able to grow the business and pay and open accounts with suppliers is rock solid. So coming into the money side of it, we sort of weed that out by viewing their personal balance sheets and how deep their pockets are and how long they could survive if they did hit trouble.
That's a really, really great point there. I've got another question on here. So somebody's been told they've got a service-based franchise and they were told it costs at least $100,000 to set up legals and a structure. If you want to just start small with 10 franchisees, would it still cost that much to set it up and get the legals in place? We're all just giving a bit of a
it's a bit of a how long's a piece of string sort of thing. I mean, I've seen them done for less. I've seen franchises built different ways. In fact, when we were looking at franchising our coffee shops all those years ago, we were going to go on a leapfrog strategy and essentially open up a company store and show that was profitable and sell that off as a franchise. And that was how we were going to expand at the time, so that the franchisee was buying something already operating rather than building a brand new greenfield site. That's how we were going to do it. So it really boils down to, like he's talking about 10 franchisees. It's the time frame of when he wants 10. Does he want 10 tomorrow? And so that's a discussion that needs to be had.
Also, I mean, I think I've had some conversations recently about starting up franchising, and I was given substantially less quotes than that. I think there's that, Abby.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought 100K. I mean, I think if you include, policies and procedure manuals and, staffing and IP, and if you want to include the whole gamut, then yeah, maybe it could push, 50 to 100, but I wouldn't with a service-based business, if you've got everything already in place, and you've got your own policies and procedure manuals and things like that, from a legal perspective, I wouldn't have thought it was even half that. Would you agree, Azim?
Yeah, look, from the ones I've seen, and you probably just hit the nail right on the head there, Clayton. If all the things are in place already that I can just replicate what I've already got, then really you're only talking about the legal structures and whatever. And the most ones that I've seen is about, 50 to 60K, including a proper, franchise agreement being drafted and all that sort of thing. So really, if the business is not ready to replicate, well, you've got some work to do before you get to that point.
And you can usually make that money back within the first couple of sales, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I was just going to add, I agree with you. I don't think you need $100,000, but the biggest expense I would say is going to be your time in preparing and doing the work, getting the manuals finalized. It comes back to time, which you can quantify the money if you like, but as far as outgoing money, definitely 100 is on the high side.
And also to set up your own legals, that could be done for a 10th of that price. And then if you're looking at all the other different franchisees, they actually pay for their own legal agreements to be drawn up. So that, if there's 10 franchisees, they pay for their own sets of legals in there. And I've got, now, and Dee's just saying, thanks. That's what she thought, especially for a service-based business where there's no stock or setup or hardware. Shop fronts. So listen, thank you very, very much. Your input has been amazing. Thank you for hanging in there around our technology issues. I'll record this up and I'll send it out to everybody and we'll promote it. But thank you very much to Azim Sahu-Khan, to Clayton Trelaor, and to Andrew Ford, and of course to our guests who managed to join us today. Thank you very much.
And I think thank you for having us. And I think what we're going to see is a surge in the number of no dickhead clauses in franchise agreements around the country.
You guys did it. It's now a thing.
That's my IP.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to District 32, immersion, inspiration for ambitious business owners with big dreams.